Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Another year has passed, and Nordic Financial Ecosystem Forum is back in Brussels. This Nordic-themed event is a joint venture by the Nordic Securities Association and Nasdaq, intended to highlight the distinctive features of the Nordic markets and what the Nordic model has to offer for the whole Europe. There is broad agreement that European capital markets as a whole are lagging behind our major competitors. At the same time, experience shows that some markets perform better than others. In many ways, the Nordic financial markets have been effective in channeling finance to Nordic enterprises. The need for action in Europe has been recognized for a long time, and action plans with well-known acronyms such as CMU, SIU, RAS, MISB have followed each other. Progress has been uneven, but the direction is clear. The situation is often characterized as US innovates, China replicates, and EU regulates. But on financial markets, regulation is not non-existent, even in the US. However, the process there is different. Federal laws are fewer in numbers and less in content than in the EU. In some corners of the EU, there is still tendency to focus on details. This is further topped by the so-called Level 2 rules, which are also binding legislation. The outcome is a pretty massive set of rules. So one could ask, should we move towards the US model? But rather than debating institutional models, the more constructive question is, how can we improve the way rules are made and applied in Europe? We have our own regulatory system, the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, and there is no going around it. That being said, it is imperative that we can improve the regulatory process. Better impact analysis, not only for the original proposal, but also for significant amendments. Inclusive and early consultations, and a conscious effort to avoid unnecessary detail. We also need realistic implementation timelines, which includes Level 2 rules being available well before implementation deadlines. And after adoption, legislation should be stable for some time. A better regulatory outcome also depends on market participants. We must engage actively and consistently, respond to consultations, provide evidence, and put forward credible alternatives. Today, we have an impressive lineup of speakers from Europe, including EU institutions, consumers, and practitioners, but also from North America. In addition to a keynote from the Commission, we have 3 panels which will deep dive into selected topics. While some of these topics are not new, they have been debated for a long time, and new topics have emerged. Adding to the clutter, there has been progress. Here, I would like to highlight the recommendation on European saving and investment accounts, which is most welcome from the Nordic perspective, and this is for 2 reasons. First, it is a recommendation, not hard law. This is important since it recognizes different situations in different member states. All member states can encourage retail investment, but using different means. Tax incentives are often mentioned as a useful tool, and they are. But at the same time, one has to acknowledge that financial situations differ from one member state to another. Taking into account the current budget situation in my home country, tax incentives are not very likely. However, we and others could adapt the recommendation since it has many other elements besides tax benefits. Second, the recommendation is based on key elements which are fundamental to the accounts, but leave room for national adaptation. From the Nordic perspective, We like its open attitude towards individual investments. For example, capital markets are global in nature, and there is no point in forcing European citizens into investing in Europe. Now, don't get me wrong here, we definitely do want more investments channeled into Europe, but we cannot force that. This must be done by making European companies more attractive and European markets more resilient. And we need to make investing in Europe and into Europe more easy, at least as easy or even easier than in the US. Unfortunately, the most recent initiative, the Market Integration and Supervision Package, addresses some of the fundamental structural issues of EU securities markets. Many of the key points it raises on integration, supervision, and market efficiency will be addressed in today's 3 panels. So dear speakers, participants, colleagues, welcome to the seminar. I'm sure we will have an interesting, active, and innovative afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And please join me in welcoming the Deputy Director General and Acting Director of General Affairs of DG FISMA, Alexandra Jur-Schröder.